It only took 5 years, Star Trek. Today on episode 247 of Trekland Tuesdays live with Dr. Trek. That's me, Larry Nemecek, coming at you right here from the heart of Trekland through Portal 47 for some clarity, sanity, and the big picture in things Star Trek. Welcome back, everybody. I'm going to get off on a little bit of a rant here. Actually, today it won't be a rant. It'll be more of a observation, a recollection. We've got this master plan now. We know what's happening. We also know, though, that, hey, congrats to Doug Jones, who won a specially newly named award. There have been Lifetime Achievement Awards from the Makeup and Hairstylists Guild here in Hollywood. Sir Patrick won it just a couple of years ago. Mike Westmore and Brent Spiner presented the award, but they've named that now, and Doug Jones is the first recipient, with none other than Sonequa giving him the award. That was looked very spiffy in his high-necked militaristic prince outfit there. Had a lot of fun with that. Good wishes to everybody who's working hard on all the shows, cranking them out, whether they're in Toronto or here in LA. And what aspect of the show they're on. It's the new reality. The new reality is that nobody is antsy about who and what and when and where. I mean, there's some antsiness, and we've got things down the pike coming. But it's a new world. We know that Discovery will roll out a couple more shows. That we know that Picard is debuting season 2 in a couple of weeks. I'll tell you, the review screeners are already out to folks. The preview for the show is coming up in just a few days. The digital online premiere, still pre-COVID. And the world is moving right along. And then after that will be the Strange New Worlds debut that everyone is waiting for in May. And then we'll catch up with the Lower Decks gang and or the Prodigy kids in some form or fashion. Now, that's where we are. What today's topic is kind of, it's a little bit of the Janus January thing, looking forward and backward, but it's such a marker because personally, this last weekend was Gallifrey 1 convention, which is a big Who convention, which is maybe the biggest Who convention in normal times in North America for Doctor Who fans. It's for more than that because one of the prime movers and shakers over there, Sean Lyon, told me 10, 12 years ago, sure, come on over and be a guest, Larry, because even Who people need more than Trek. It was also true that for a long time they were in their fallow period, like we had our fallow period, and they tended to offset. When we were sky high, Who was taking a decade off, and then when we took the 12 years off is when they were getting reestablished. But I always go, and yeah, there's a lot of crossover fandom, and it's the first convention of the year in a lot of ways, and it feels fresh, and it's kind of wintry, but not always. Most of all, it was the last live convention I was at before the pandemic hit in 2020. We've had the pre-Omicron wave come back to Trek Vegas, had the mini San Diego Comic-Con Thanksgiving do up, and I even just was at a small city con in Yuma, Arizona. So it's not the first, it's not like goalpost to goalpost here, but it was certainly a marker in my mind. The last time I was in LA's Con Central, the LAX Marriott, was Gallifrey. And that, yes, given that mix, they went at it half size. They intentionally scaled everything back by half. There was a lot less pressing up, but still a lot of people, a lot of good times, a lot of fun. I'm there mining, helping to support the Trek people, and there were Trek faces there. Dominic and Andy Robinson were there on Friday. Congratulations also to Dominic and Connor for launching their podcast, the Shuttle Pod Show. So it was a fun time. What's interesting, though, is I always laugh about it. Gallifrey always has what I call the token Trek panel, and then I usually do something of my own. And this year I just made it simple, but also informative, and did our State of the Trek fan forum that I do at conventions, where I kind of kick things off, throw the topics out there, and then let fans take it from there and let people compare and contrast. And I'm just going to say this. I love to talk about how the dealers at Comic-Cons compare fandoms and tell me, oh, well, Star Trek has the nicest fandom. But I want to say that I think only because they're so insular and don't turn up a lot at Comic-Cons, those dealers don't see Who fandom. Because I think a rival for Star Trek fandom is that Who fandom. Maybe it's the British DNA, don't you know? Or I don't know. I don't think it's all that timey-wimey to say that I think Who fandom is as nice, even more genteel maybe than Trek fandom. So if you're at a WhoCon with overtones of the next biggest franchise involved being Trek, it's a pretty nice thing. So I'm going to say this also. When we've been live at cons, and I know any of you all that go also, this famous, the last 5, 6, 7 years, the online toxicity of fandom seems to evaporate when you get live. When you get people face to face, that all seems to go away. So either all those people are butthurt secretly because they don't have the money to attend, or they're so far out in the boonies, they're cut off some civilization and can't get to anything, or that's just a function of the dissonance of the not cognitive dissonances of the aesthetic distance they have, not being in anyone's face. Because it's rare that now I'm not talking about fan debates. I'm not talking about good old bar fights over fandom and opinions. That's awesome, and that's what fandom is. I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking. So not only does that disappear at live cons, at Gallifrey, it's especially on a nice level. But even then, both at the big panel, my buddy James Kerr was one of the other people on the Fivesome panel, and then on my solo time, I had to stop and think about how far we've come. Because when you open up the floor to fans, just like I try to do here every week, as I bounce off with the Portales, whenever we have a chance to do that, talk about current events. 5 years ago, we knew that Discovery's first season, the debut of Discovery, was going to happen probably sometime in 2017. There'd been already a year's worth of delays from when the initial start dates had been named. So we knew there was tension there. We're right at about 5 years, pandemic and not, of the time we knew that Discovery was probably coming in the fall, sometime in there. And of course, everything was tight-lipped coming out of CBS All Access. Nobody wanted to speak. Everything was such a tight lid on security. You'd think it was the D-Day invasion. And that had to strike me. We started off talking with folks in the audience, and I thought about how far we'd come. Yeah, we had one person from across the pond who was not upset, but just kind of eye-rolling about the whole debacle with Netflix and Discovery and Star Trek and the coming of Paramount Plus, which in the last couple of weeks there have been some headlines. We talked about it last week. It was breaking, I think. In the UK and the Caribbean and other parts by mid-year. The heart of Europe, though, is not going to get Paramount Plus until the end of the year. But I couldn't help thinking where we were 5 years ago. The discourse in this room, and we had disagreements, but the savviness in the room was so far beyond. We had different people talking about how they tried to watch all Trek, but here's their issue with Discovery. I had opinions about how Discovery was not their favorite. I had opinions about how Discovery was their favorite. I did have 2 or 3 people stand up and say, yes, I think Lower Decks represents the best of all Trek. It honors everything, and I can't wait for more. There were a couple of gasps in the room, and I'm talking about a room of, on one day, maybe 40 people, on the other day, maybe 25 or 30, in a small-ish room, not in a cavern. So we were actually close enough that we could hear each other gasp or giggle or chortle or guffaw or harumph. Okay. And there were a couple of gasps when that came out. A couple of people thought that Prodigy was the best of all, and it's tickled them. And so there we go. This is a room at a convention which skews older. But by the time I went back through my show of hands poll, not what was your first Trek, but what's your favorite? Favorites were starting to splinter up. And it wasn't all original and next gen. DS9 carried its weight. Voyager was a little underrepresented, but there were 4 or 5 hands for the 2 animateds. But most of all was the discussion. Not a lot of kids of parents. It was mainly singles and couples. But after we went around the horn, people talked about everything, promotion, the strengths and weaknesses of the series. It was a very, what you would expect, a very audience-friendly discussion. One woman at the beginning talked about she watched Discovery, how she was disappointed in it, though, and here's why. And most people acknowledging that it was definitely evolving. 2 people in the room, I've started to hear this. I'm starting to hear from people who liked Discovery more the first 2 seasons than when they jumped ahead, which makes no, either from a stability of writing, storytelling standpoint, or the good old canon background looking like they're just a fish out of water fit. But there you go. That's people's opinion. And they'll tell you why. They'll list all 4 or 5 reasons why. And it's all good. I heard some people talking about why they were sad that Discovery seemed like it was slowing down and wasn't as rip-roaring as it had been and wasn't as adult. Adult meaning they weren't afraid to jump into not gratuitous, but gore. And, Ripper. Think Ripper slapping around poor Landry. Think about the horror and terror of those early episodes while they're trying to get a tone. And they're probably spending money out the wazoo. We had room for diversity of opinions talking about, and people talking about how I've seen people appreciating how they're seeing more thoughtful character scenes in Discovery, especially the last year. And I had people criticizing that fact and having everybody kind of blink twice when I brought up the fact that was probably COVID driving that. And everyone thought, oh, I mean, some people may have, but enough people, that was news to them. So there we go. The highlight of the day to me on my solo day was a young woman, I'm going to guess in her mid-20s, but younger than most everybody else in the room. But she'd been paying her own way in life a while. And she said she's sitting here at a HooCon in one of the 2 Trek panels of the weekend and we talked about how she had never been she just started off. She patiently waited. She was finally about the 6th or 7th or 8th person. Talked about how she'd never been a Star Trek fan. Didn't dislike it. She obviously was a Who fan. She had other fandoms that she enjoyed. She never disliked Trek. She just never got around to it. I didn't ask her if she was intimidated by the 800 hours thing. But she said no. But it was the pandemic and facing all that time. And she said, you know what? Why not now? I said, well, what did you do? And she said, I started with the original series. I started with the Cage and went forward. And you could hear the room kind of go, ooh. And I watched everything in order. Ooh. And then she said, and when we got to the overlaps, TNG DS9 and then DS9 Voyager, she said, I bifurcated and I watched them all in aired order back and forth between the series with the movies popped in where they should have been. And I said, ooh, good on you. Enterprise, Kelvin's, then Discovery. I said, well, what do you think? She said, I loved it. I get it. I totally get it. But I also see why everybody thought Discovery ruined the canon. Which almost had me fall off my chair. And she said, no, but I watched it all and I get it. And it's like the last 5 to 10 to 30 years unlocked for her, which was an awesome thing to see. And the room was kind of in awe. She was just sitting in her chair, just talking like this, just with her hands in her lap, just looking at me. I wish I'd got her name afterwards. The whole effect, both days with the 5-person panel with 40 people, 40 to 60 people, and the smaller room with media, but with 20 to 30. Both days, the tone was, well, here we are. We got a lot of Star Trek, and we all have our differences of opinion. It's a convention which never was raucous. I remember being at conventions, most of all, 5 years. It only took 5 years, Star Trek. Not a single person talked about the delivery system and the price tag. In 5 years, and before there was Disney Plus, and before there was Apple TV Plus, before there was Discovery, before all of that, there was Peacock. There was little old CBS All Access out there trying to turn the corner and have original programming, and they were the tip of the spear. They were the cutting edge of the whole I'm not paying for it. The whole app revolution, the whole streaming revolution. We are not where we were 5 years ago with that. Nary a word was said, aside from the Netflix, Paramount Plus kerfluffle for most of the rest of the world, for the global markets there. Aside from that, and aside from the breaking up of Prodigy in a weird way, thank you, Post on Discovery being delayed, which you can't blame anybody for that. No, it really brought it back to me how that first year, 5 years ago, we almost never got to, even into 2018, we couldn't get to the content of the show because half of the hour was taken up with people getting it off their chest about paying, which, yes, was the way of the world, but people hadn't lived that way. People who don't live in media and they don't live with all this stuff didn't see the coming storm. And we've gone there now. And now there's so many more choices. And now Paramount Plus is battling back, at least until there's some more mergers, battling back to be a home for genre and original. We'll try to get some numbers. I saw some numbers last week. I don't have them here with me, but they're hanging in there, doing. And obviously, Star Trek is coming back. They're going to make plans. There's going to be 3 SpongeBob spinoff movies. So yay on the newly remarried brand, which we can now call Paramount again. But I was sitting there watching this respectful discussion, which we tend to have in cons, which we tend to really have at certain cons, at Trek Vegas and at Galley, for starters. It really reminded me of how far we've come in 5 years. And 2 of that was pandemic, I know. As we come out of the shadows and as we reopen for cons, as the Trek cruise prepares to sail on Saturday. And everybody be safe who's going on the cruise, if you are. As we set sail with conventions reopening and trying to get back on schedule, as we've all lived through, I was doing this before, you will remember, but as so much of the world, much less of fandom, has adjusted to the beauty and the miracle that is streaming, not just during pandemics, but maybe if you are out in the middle of the boonies, you're having Star Trek brought right to you besides some professional provider. All of these changes made me think about what the last time I met at Gallifrey, much less 5 years since Kurtzman Trek, since the modern era, since the whole paradigm in Star Trek, and what we talked about over the weekend, what streaming looked like. And it wasn't just getting used to the idea of paying for an app, but it was also, what does streaming look like? And yes, I had to take a little brag and talk about how I was trying to kid and soothe all the aggrieved souls in 2017 and 2018 about the serialized structure, especially the baby steps in learning how to do Trek in a serialized structure lens. That, 5 or 6, 7 shows in, we'll have this radical notion to have self-contained shows again, which exactly is where Strange New Worlds is. Like, let them have their pendulum swing, and it will swing back. And here we are already. Thank you, Ensign Mount, for if up in the game. I don't know that Section 31 would not have been just as serialized as everybody else so far. So yes, it's a discussion we talked about and of course, the favorite thing we've just lived through the last year of the whole animation expectation, the low bar for it, and suddenly everybody, each in their own way, falling in love the same or differently with Lower Decks and Prodigy, and anxious to see more. It's not the same world it was 3 years ago, much less 5, but we've really been whipsawed a lot since 2017. And I'm coming up on 5 years of doing this myself, and we've been here to talk about it and see it all, which has been kind of amazing. I just don't know, is the same way. I will never forget the guy in the back left of the room at Phoenix Comic-Con about 2012, 2013, the time when Starfleet Intelligence blog said that I said that CBS and Netflix had a deal for a new Star Trek show. I announced this in a panel in 2013. Right. Thank you very much. No, what I'd said was, keep watching Star Trek on Netflix, and the more that counter spins, the faster we'll have Star Trek back, is what I said. But I'll never forget the guy in the back corner of the room. He said, you know what? I came in with the Kelvin movies. He went back to the beginning and watched all Star Trek. And he wound up saying, and now I can totally say, I know, the Kelvins are crap. And he could say that. Everybody's going to have a different opinion. But he was one who came in with them. He did not dance with the one that brung him. This young lady, she came stag. She started at the beginning and went through. She wasn't predisposed to anything. And anyway, it was the same thing but different, which is what all Star Trek is. I don't know. Has it occurred to anybody else that we're coming up on 5 years of our Discovery countdown? 5 years when all these moments at cons, we were getting bits and pieces of looks. Anytime now, we're going to come up on the 5-year anniversary of the famous leaked Instagram of the extra Klingon who showed the world what the Klingons were going to look like and ignited that debate. So right. I think everybody in my rooms this weekend got the idea of species diversity and how we smooth things over and what we're going to do with the original series episodes. Maybe they're going to have to finally just be fondly thought of as the public consumption model. We've talked about that before. Don't let me shock you with that one. As much as I'm sentimentally wishing they had tackled that issue of same lines, different shooting, not going to happen. In a Mirror Darkly did not prove anything, apparently, to some people. But yeah, have you reflected on how much things have changed? I'm glad we're not wasting our time and breath and energy on these side issues that aren't going to matter in the long run. I try to keep my focus, what's going to matter in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years? Because part of that equation we don't know. The world is going to swing. External factors, wars, famine, pandemics are all going to come along that we can't foresee, blind us to the way we experience things, and make us reevaluate what we saw before. Can you say 9/11 and DS9? Yeah. So who knows? Wow. It really felt like a marker, and I was so proud. I was so proud to watch my babies. A little too paternal there, Larry. My babies talking in such a great way. And when I was on the panel, having such a diversity of opinions, that people coming from still being TNG fans or DS9 fans and loving Prodigy, loving Discovery, and loving early Discovery better than later Discovery. Who knew? Iddick. And we are all one big happy fleet. If you are leaving us right now, and somebody else I really appreciate is all of our Patreons from my very simple Patreon group. Our TTLers there: Diana Hopkins, Robin Wilson, Lawrence Todd, Anne-Marie Siegel, Keith Rombach, Justin Porteous, Nathaniel Robinson, and Blaze K. Thank you all so much, and especially our live wires: Rusty Harrell, Halberd Gunn Johnson, Jalen Bullock, Robert McLean, Alan Hoansey, J.R. Poole, Byron Bailey, Dave Gregory, and Casey Shafsky. You know, I have a very simple Patreon. It's just a $5 and $10 a month, nothing complicated. You can check it out at patreon.com/Trekland Live. Put in a little bit and help us out as we spread the streaming empire of Trekland across all these Trekland channels. Hey, also, I'd love it if you would check out the Trek Files. It's at Roddenberry, podcast.roddenberry.com, or just go to Facebook. Facebook is where our documents of the week. We have homework. It's fun homework. It's the documents we talk about with the progress. This week, the great, the one, the only David Livingston is back with us. And we're talking about how directors are chosen and how they're lined up and budgeted. And we're looking at 1960s docs, and then David updates us. It's a real fun discussion. It's only 15, 20 minutes a week. And yes, back Saturdays, Life Support Live. Dr. Trek and Dr. Ali. One of us is a real doctor. We are boldly going through uncertain times. A lot of Star Trek, a little bit of daily living tips. It's a lot of fun. 10 a.m. Pacific Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern. 6 UK time. Central Europe is at 7, and it's right here on these same Trekland channels. God, we might have another week where there's news breaking. I mean Star Trek news. There's enough news out in the world that's stressful enough. So I'm not sticking my head I'm not down the ostrich hole here, but I'm just saying the Star Trek news has been reassuring and hopeful too. So let's see what's happening. Okay. That's it. All you YouTubers, if you're watching me on YouTube only after the fact, you really should check us out live on Tuesday. It's a great community, and it's the immediacy. It's the immediacy. Until next Tuesday, then, please, stay healthy. Would you? Do all the things, even now. Stay woke. Check your sources, and be open to news that you had not heard about once you have checked your sources. That includes make sure you're talking to a real human being if you feel so aroused. And Trek well, everybody.